The stars above Earth burned cold and distant, indifferent witnesses to the war that had scorched the planet below. Smoke still curled from the ruins of shattered cities, drifting like ghostly tendrils over silent concrete bones. The once proud cradle of humanity had become a mausoleum, sterilized by the Galactic Council's crusade for order. They had called it a necessary purge, surgical, efficient, justified. Admiral Kaler of the Varn Dominion stood at the edge of a scorched ridge, overlooking what used to be a human military installation. His black-plated armor hummed faintly with kinetic shielding, but there was no danger here anymore. The last resistance cell had fallen 2 cycles ago. Scouting drones had swept the debris fields, heat and biosignature scans run 6 times over. Earth was finished. Final sweep report confirms. A subordinate reported. No remaining combatants. All zones are secure. Kaler nodded, tapping a Talon finger against his wrist panel. Begin exfiltration protocols. Notify the Council. Operation Solstice is complete. Overhead, the sky split briefly as a Council warship blinked out of the atmosphere. In its wake, silence settled across the ruin like a death shroud. Behind Kaler, squads of alien infantry scavenged for tech remnants, uploading data and dismantling weapon caches. None of them noticed a faint flicker of movement beneath the twisted steel girders 50 meters away. No sensor pinged. No alarm blared. Buried beneath the rubble, half-conscious and slick with dried blood, Sergeant Calendrax exhaled slowly through cracked lips. They missed him. His rifle lay cradled against his chest, wrapped in shredded camouflage netting and scorched cloth. The barrel was warped. The scope was cracked. But it would shoot. He would make it shoot. His left leg was crushed beneath a steel beam, nerves screaming every time he moved. His right arm was gashed from wrist to elbow. Infection was setting in. The aliens had assumed he was dead. Logical, given the cratered state of his sniper nest. But logic, Callan knew, was a poor substitute for paranoia. That mistake had cost his team everything. He counted breaths. 6 seconds in. For seconds out. It kept the pain at bay. It kept the anger focused. Spectre Zero. That was the name of his squad. Ghost in the field. No records. No insignia. Ghost died quietly, but not him. Not yet. Callan had watched his brothers and sisters and arms vaporized by orbital fire. He'd heard the last screams in his comms as alien hunter drones cut them down. The war was over, the Council believed. Earth was pacified. A footnote in the larger conquest of what they called the lesser civilizations. He shifted his weight, gritting his teeth until his molars ground. His fingers moved with muscle memory, checking the last 2 armor-piercing rounds in his rifle's mag. He had no food, no water, and no med supplies. But he had ammunition. And hate. Enough of both to make the Council regret the oversight. He lay still as a squad of Varn infantry marched by, their exosuits clanking faintly on rubble. They didn't see him. The gilly shroud blended seamlessly with the broken earth. When they passed, Callan finally let his breath release. His HUD flickered on and off, cracked from the blast. He blinked commands manually, pulling up a crude local map. Power to his comms was dead, but he marked the patrol's movement anyway, out of habit. Somewhere in the numb ache of his thoughts, he considered the irony. They'd won the war. Yet he remained alive in the shadow of their victory. Forgotten, dismissed. That was their final mistake. Callan began to crawl. Every inch was agony. Debris sliced at him, and his leg dragged uselessly behind. He moved like a serpent, silent, patient, vengeful. In the charred ruins of a military vehicle, he found a cracked medkit. The coagulant foam burned like fire when he injected it into his wounds, but it kept him from bleeding out. He took painkillers. He rewrapped his fingers. Then he waited. The sun set slowly over the cratered skyline, casting long shadows across a world robbed of its defiance. Alien floodlights clicked on in the distance, bathing the area in pale blue. Drones whirred overhead like insects. One passed within 10 meters of him and never slowed. By nightfall, Callan had reached higher ground. The skeleton of an office building that had once overseen a command center. The vantage point still stood. Barely. Its jagged edge gave him sight lines across a wide sector. He settled in among the bones and dust, watching, learning. Below, The aliens moved like victors, too relaxed, too complacent. A commander barked orders. Technicians repaired equipment. Nobody watched the shadows. Nobody feared them anymore. Callan adjusted his rifle. He had no delusions of victory. He would die here, probably within the week. But before that happened, he would remind them who they had tried to erase. Not by screaming, not with banners or speeches, but with precision, with patience, with single shots that echoed through their ranks like whispers of a forgotten ghost. His finger hovered over the trigger. The crosshairs settled on the alien commander's throat. Spectre Zero never missed, and neither would he. The first shot didn't echo. It whispered, a perfect spiral of death that slipped through the throat of the Varn commander like a scalpel through silk. He fell mid-command, gurgling on blood and disbelief as the light left his luminous yellow eyes. Chaos erupted instantly. Troopers scrambled for cover, their rifles whirring to life, scanning rooftops with wide arcs of plasma light. But the bullet had come from nowhere. No muzzle flash, no sound, only the soft slump of a body collapsing into dirt. Callan Drax was already gone. He moved like vapor through the skeletal remains of the city, dragging his injured leg through corridors of shadow. He'd memorized every route in the zone during Earth's final defense. Every drainage duct, every broken staircase, every collapsed hallway. The aliens might have razed the cities, but their arrogance had left the bones behind. Bones that still remembered how to shelter a ghost. 3 hours later, while the aliens were still combing rooftops with frustration and fury, another Varn officer bled out against a shattered wall. This one was struck mid-transmission. The shot punched through the communication array on his shoulder and drilled into his spine. By the time the rest of his team found him, the body was still warm and the uplink was fried. No witness, no trail. The Council had expected resistance to die with Earth's armies. They hadn't accounted for Callan, nor the discipline carved into his soul through years of sniper doctrine. One shot, one move, one ghost. In the underbelly of fallen high-rise, he patched himself again with what little remained in the medkit. His fingers shook as he stitched the gash on his side, lips pressed into a line so thin it nearly vanished. Every movement sent fire licking up his nerves. But he didn't scream. Screaming was for the dying. He wasn't ready yet. He kept a journal in a cracked datapad salvaged from an alien corpse. Entries typed in broken sentences, jagged thoughts. Not for posterity. For control. For sanity. Second kill. Officer class. Center of mass. No wasted motion. Wind 3 knots southwest. Distance 421 meters. Ammo down to 6 rounds. Pain spreading in hip. No infection yet. Water scavenged from filter unit, non-lethal. I'm still here. Above ground, the aliens grew unsettled. The Varn weren't just soldiers. They were conquerors, used to resistance crumbling at the sight of orbital fire. But now their patrols came back with one less trooper. Or didn't come back at all. They increased sweep zones, reinforced forward posts. Drones flew thicker over sectors once thought pacified, and Callan adapted. He began laying traps, improvised explosives cobbled from alien plasma cells and Earth's leftover tech. Not for wide destruction. Precision again. A fuel tank, a corner of a barracks, a comms node. Each time, the explosion left no pattern. One looked like a power surge, another like structural fatigue. He even left the collapsed surveillance tower appearing, as if it had buckled under its own weight. The illusion mattered. Confusion bred fear. Fear slowed them down. He studied their patterns like a scientist dissects an organism. Alien squads moved in predictable formations. They trusted their tech too much. Thermal scans, motion sensors, AI-assisted terrain mapping. But Callan wasn't noise. He was silence. Cold. Patient. Watching from cracks in the earth. From behind burned-out transports and hollowed-out statues of forgotten leaders. He scavenged a functioning alien scope and grafted it to his rifle. Calibrating it took hours. But once done, he could see farther, track better, kill more efficiently. Then came the fourth kill, different from the others. He'd tracked this one for days. A tall alien sergeant with a habit of breaking formation to berate his troops, his voice carrying across broken plazas like a whip. Callan waited. Let him walk the same path 3 times. On the 4th, he left the corpse cooling in the dust, but not without leaving a message. On the wall behind the body, drawn in ash and smear blood, he painted a skull over a crosshair. Crude, unmistakable. Human. It spread faster than he anticipated. 2 days later, in another zone, graffiti appeared in the same symbol. Not his doing. Human survivors had seen it, copied it, whispered about it. The ghost. A sniper who couldn't be seen, couldn't be heard, but always struck true. Someone still fighting. Someone proving the council wasn't omnipotent. Callan watched the rumors spiral from the dark. He didn't claim them, didn't feed them, but he didn't deny them either. Symbols had power. Legends could move people where orders couldn't. If his presence stirred fear in the enemy and hope in the scattered bones of his people, so be it. Still, he didn't allow himself to believe in the myth. This was revenge, not entirely. It was correction. The council thought humanity would forget how to kill when their satellites fell. They thought fire would erase instinct. But Callan had learned in the cold silence of sniper training that war wasn't noise. It was patience, steel, and intent. And now they were teaching him something new, how fragile empires truly were. Late one night, tucked into the second floor of a bombed-out medical facility, he sighted an alien technician working on a relay tower. No guards, no armor, vulnerable. His finger hovered over the trigger. Then he lowered the rifle. Killing the technician would spark repairs, replacements, guard rotations. But letting him live, letting him transmit corrupted coordinates Callan had tampered with earlier, that would scramble command channel for hours. A better kill. He leaned back into the shadows and listened to the transmission go live. The voice on the alien channel was clipped, irritated, perfect. His breath slowed, the pain in his body now a quiet throb, manageable. Beneath the agony, beneath the weariness, something else pulsed. Rhythm, purpose. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was composing something. A requiem for the council. The sniper's presence was no longer rumor. It was disruption. A pattern of calculated violence threaded through the alien command logs, each death too precise to be chance. Patrol captains filed daily reports stained with fear. Soldiers began speaking in hushed voices. Not about a human rebellion, but about a phantom. A single ghost with a rifle and vengeance carved into his bones. Callan watched the fear blossom, like rot in the Varn ranks. He saw in the eyes of soldiers who flinched at the wind, who snapped their rifles toward shadows. One even discharged into a pile of rubble, convinced it was a trap. There were no bodies, no blood, just nerves unraveling. He had spent weeks learning how they thought. Now he was unmaking that thinking, one bullet at a time. At night, he stalked through corridors of ash and silence, planting sonic decoys and triggering old Earth alarms in empty zones. Some he paired with ancient Earth music, static-laced broadcasts of distorted piano or human voices speaking long-dead languages. To the aliens, it was madness. To Callan, it was a language of disquiet. A patrol once arrived at a relay tower only to find it looping a woman's voice saying, "Target acquired," over and over in a calm, emotionless tone. They fled. He didn't laugh. There was no room for joy, but there was a grim satisfaction in the alien reports he scavenged. One described him as a psychological hazard. Another referred to him as the anomaly. But the one that mattered most came from a Varn general whose message was intercepted by a dying human rebel and relayed through a crumbling comm beacon. This is not a soldier. This is a predator. Callan wore the words like a mantle. His body was failing faster now. The infection he'd suppressed with sheer what was gaining ground. His leg burned hot and swollen beneath scavenged bandages. Sleep came in short, vicious snatches, interrupted by phantom pain and remembered screams. Yet still he hunted. He began targeting supply lines, watching from elevated ruins as dropships offloaded crates of plasma cells and synthetic rations. He would let them begin their operations before lancing through a power unit or rupturing a coolant tank. Explosions followed. Confusion. Retreat. The aliens began assigning more troops to guard duties. Fewer were available for patrols. Their control slipped millimeter by millimeter. He watched it all from the dark with fevered eyes, each victory keeping his body moving despite itself. He stopped checking his wounds. There was no point. He wasn't healing. He was hollowing. But that hollow was filling with something more dangerous than blood. Purpose. The council responded with escalation. They dispatched Commander Virex, a cold-eyed tactician from the SYTH delegation, to Earth. Known for dismantling entire rebellions with surgical brutality, Virex made his presence known with a public execution of human prisoners, broadcast on every alien channel in Earth's orbit. No context, just pain. Callan watched the broadcast from the ruins of an observatory. He didn't react. He didn't scream. He simply turned the volume down and began planning. Virex would become his next objective. Not immediately. He was too well guarded. But Callan began peeling away the layers. He tracked Virex's logistics officers, killed 2 and maimed a 3rd, then moved on to comm relays, severed the general's access to forward recon data, confused his timing, forced him to send convoys blind. The psychological war intensified. The sniper mark, the skull and the crosshair, now appeared in 3 different zones Callan had never visited. Other humans were taking up the symbol. Not snipers, not trained, but angry, inspired. His myth was spreading faster than his bullets. Aliens began defecting. Not many, not the elite, but enough. Some Varn soldiers simply stopped showing up at their posts. Others destroyed their weapons and vanished. One squad even left a surrender broadcast playing on a loop before disappearing entirely into the wastelands. The Council's tight control was fragmenting. And still Callan pushed forward. He heard them talk about him on intercepted comms, about the Earthshade, about the killer that walks between seconds. They guessed he was augmented, genetically enhanced. They were wrong. He was just angry. One night, on the edge of Sector 9, he came face to face with a young human woman, barely 20, covered in dust and wielding a salvaged alien rifle. She froze. He didn't. She raised her hands. "Are you the ghost?" Callan didn't answer, but he didn't shoot either. "People are saying you're more than one person," she said quietly. "They think you're some kind of weapon we buried and forgot." He let the silence stretch. "We've started fighting again," she said. "Because of you." Callan blinked slowly, as if trying to reconcile what her words meant to him. He hadn't meant to lead anyone, but now people were following. Before he left, he handed her 2 of his precious rounds and pointed toward a broken radio tower. No words, just intention. That night, he made another kill, one of Virex's senior logistics minds. The alien's head exploded mid-speech during a strategy briefing. Panic swept through the camp. Virex ordered all forces into lockdown. Too late. The cracks had become fractures. Callan crawled back into the shadows, blood leaking from beneath his armor, his lungs rasping like paper. He leaned against the wall of a fallen monument and stared up at the stars. He didn't need to win. He just needed the machine to grind itself to death trying to catch him. The Council had made one mistake. They left a human alive, and he was teaching them what that meant. The Galactic Council's flagship broke through the clouds like a god descending, casting a silver shadow over the broken earth below. Its hull shimmered with kinetic shielding and ceremonial markings, a flying cathedral of conquest. This was no ordinary ship. This was spectacle. Commander Virex had summoned it not to fight, but to be seen, to remind the surviving fragments of humanity and the increasingly jittery alien forces that control had not been lost. Callan Drax lay prone on the top floor of a gutted skyscraper, wrapped in a blood-stained ghillie cloak that blended with shattered rebar and concrete dust. The building groaned under its own weight, one strong breeze away from collapse. But it gave him what he needed: elevation, cover, and a line of sight. He didn't look at the ship. He looked at the podium below it. The plaza had been cleared for a public address. Virex was making another move, this time with cameras, drones, and orbital broadcasting. 1,000 soldiers encircled the site. A wall of energy shields shimmered to keep threats at bay. Mech stood on overwatch, everything calculated to show power. But Callan had been calculating too. He had spent 3 days crawling into position, bypassing sensor fields, mapping patrol cycles, waiting for precise configuration of sunlight and atmospheric distortion. He had eaten nothing, slept only in 4-minute intervals. His body screamed, but his mind was cold. Focused. The modified rifle lay silent beside him, a fusion of Earth steel and alien optics. It was ugly, uneven, and deadly. He had calibrated it down to the micron, adjusted for drop, curvature, humidity, even the slight electromagnetic hum of the alien shields. This was not a shot. It was an equation. One shot, one chance, one moment to carve a message into the bones of an empire. Through the cracked lens of his scope, he saw Virek emerge. The alien commander's armor was ceremonial, gold and black, layered like the shell of a beetle. His voice rang out through the plaza, magnified and translated in 6 dialects. He spoke of strength, of unity, of dominance, of how fear was weakness and how the so-called ghost would be brought to justice. Soldiers pounded weapons against their chests in rehearsed rhythm. Callan's finger tightened around the trigger. Wind, 21 degrees west. Slight updraft. Distance, 3,129 meters. Virex lifted his arm, preparing to end the speech with a rallying phrase, something that would be etched into council records. Callan exhaled and fired. The sound was softer than a whisper, swallowed by distance and time. For a second, nothing happened. Then Virex staggered. The hole was so clean it took the crowd a heartbeat to process it. Blood spilled from the bottom of his chin. The crowd didn't scream until his body hit the floor, armored limbs twitching. Chaos detonated. Energy shields flared to maximum. Drones scattered in confused spirals. Soldiers yelled conflicting orders, scanning for a shooter that didn't exist. Mets opened suppressive fire on empty buildings. One even collapsed under its own barrage. But Callan was already moving. He dragged himself through a maintenance shaft, dropped down a destroyed elevator shaft, and vanished into the tunnels below before the first recon scan reached his rooftop perch. In the streets, everything changed. News of Virex's assassination traveled faster than the broadcast feed could be cut. Humans in hiding cheered in whispers. Rebel cells surged into movement. Alien troops, demoralized and leaderless, began retreating from peripheral zones. Some simply dropped their weapons and fled. The myth became real. The ghost had not only survived, he had struck the heart. Callan rested in the dark under the bones of a broken highway, the shot replaying in his mind, not with pride, but with precision. It had cost him nearly everything. His body was failing beyond recovery. His vision blurred. Every breath rattled like dying leaves. He found shelter inside the husk of an old metro station, far beneath the city's shattered crust. There, he sat with his back to a rusted pillar, rifle across his knees, his breath shallow. The pain had become a steady hum. The infection was beyond control now. Even consciousness came and went like waves crashing against a tired shore. He activated the last remaining function in his datapad and wrote a final message. No name, no location, just a line of coordinates and 6 words. Keep your finger on the trigger. He didn't hear the search team that found him 2 days later. Human, young, armed with alien gear and old fury. They approached the body carefully, unsure if the ghost was really dead or pretending. But Callan Drax was still, face pale, eyes closed, rifle resting like a crown. They buried him beneath the metro, wrapped in his cloak, beneath a wall painted with the mark he made infamous, the skull and crosshair. Years later, when Earth was free again, they would build a monument there, not of him, but his rifle, mounted on a pedestal of fused steel and broken stone. At its base, in quiet engraving, were words carved from truth. The Council's mistake wasn't leaving him alive. It was believing humans die quietly,